Radio Retro Future.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this steampunkish game retrospective of Divinity, Dragon Commander. It was released in 2015 by Larian Studios. The people are also working on Divinity Original Sin 2 that will be released in September, which also hints that it is taking place in the same world. But unfortunately the game is not very specific on that. Regardless, Larian Studios focuses themselves on fantasy RPG style gameplay, so of course you can expect such RPG elements in this RTS title as well, or real-time strategy games, for those that are not familiar with it. The combination of RPG with RTS is not an unfamiliar combination. There are plenty of game series that are very much like this, but let's check out Larian Studios' take on that. Now, I didn't choose this title because it's well-known. As a matter of fact, I think it's pretty forgotten by now. Matter of fact, I had a hard time finding what the title was again because it's very unconventional. It was very popular at the time. I don't recall anyone ever mentioning it ever since, and unfortunately that is for a good reason. Nonetheless, it's a really interesting title to explore. Well, let's just start right at the beginning, where you can see that Divinity Dragon Commander has a bit of a steampunk aesthetic going on. Now, this is a fantasy world, it's not alternate history. You better expect there to be a lot of fantasy tropes. Also, the style itself is your very typical steampunk, so therefore it just didn't have much staying power when it comes to rememberability. However, we do have to remember there are very few games like this. Especially in the RTS genre, steampunk is very rare. The only one I can remember is Rise of Legends from, I don't know, before 2010, I think, that have Da Vinci, that are inspired mostly by the Renaissance and the works of Leonardo da Vinci, but clearly have a steampunk influence going on in there. Also, that game series was also greatly inspired by Stargate. But beyond that, there are not many AAA titles you can find that apply to steampunk genre. Steampunk is still very much a indie thing. But many of these games seem to introduce a very unique type of gameplay. For example, Guns of Icarus. Now, Larian Studios itself is a bit more of a mid-tier studio, but they do try a lot of new things here, and I want to explore especially those new things as, well, the RTS part of the game is actually rather meh. However, it does have a rock, paper, scissors system, which means that one type of unit deals additional damage to another type of unit, and vice versa. However, when it's possible to just build the strongest units you can buy and just spawn those endlessly and toss them against the enemy force, yeah, it is rendered rather mute, unfortunately. Also, the combat itself is rather clusterfucky. Basically, the enemy will just toss these big heaps of enemies at you, and you basically do the same thing in order to counter it. There's very little tactics involved. Just try to waste less units than your enemy, and you'll be fine. Where tactics are involved are the maps themselves. There are only limited places where you can build. On the map there are all kinds of plots. One are for defensive structures, then there are plots for factories and other production buildings where you can build your units, and then there are citadels. The citadels are recruitment stations, and recruits are a resource that's only limitedly available. The more citadels you have, the more recruits you generate. However, they're drawn from a limited pool, so both players have to build as many citadels as possible in order to be able to generate recruits. And if the recruits on the map are gone, that's it, you can build no more units. And then basically it's a matter of time before one of the party wins. Now, the game does have a kind of a capture the flag / domination element to it. You see, you have a number of victory points, and if those victory points are gone, you lose the game. Now, those victory points are generated by building enough units, by conquering enough of these plots, and also depends on how many units you destroy. And if you lose too much plots, too much units, you lose the game. Even though you might have an army marching around and your home base is still intact. However, due to the nature of the gameplay and its clusterfucky elements, it is actually a good way to get through those stalemate sections of the game. Because of its dedication to its rock, paper, scissors elements, it doesn't have any real breakthrough units like in strategy games like Supreme Commander. You don't have any units that are extremely long range, for example, so you can bombard the enemy from afar rather than having to keep throwing heaps of units at them and hoping to get through with enough to deal some damage. Which is ironic because it does feel that they were inspired by games like Supreme Commander, which were very popular at the time. As for the units themselves, you got your typical troopers, which are basically just fodder, but they do have the ability to capture buildings intact. You've got your fast-moving scouts that can also deal a lot of damage to troopers. Then you've got your simple fighters, you've got your zeppelins. You also have a number of ships, like your typical ironclads, which is our run-of-the-mill combat ship. Then you've got the dreadnoughts, which are capable to bombard the enemy from afar. Of course, you also have both air and land transports, which are very useful and very essential to the game on the world map. However, here comes my first bugbear of the game. You see, all these units have special abilities, which is nice, of course, to have more options with your units. But because you spawn units on such a mass, it's hard to actually control these things without being obsessive compulsive about your macros. And I'm not such a player, so I rarely want to use them. However, that doesn't stop the computer from spawning such abilities endlessly. You have warlocks that can transform your units into love bugs, which is fun. However, it's really annoying when they keep spawning such abilities. Now let's talk about the main attraction of the RTS portion of this game. It's not uncommon for the players to have an avatar on the field of battle in RTS games, like Warcraft 3 for example. However, Divinity Dragon Commander took it one step further. You see, the protagonist in this game is a lost son of a king that has died. However, it turns out good old dad liked to sleep around. As a result, he had multiple children that are now fighting over the throne. So kids, always use a condom. However, in your particular case, you were sired with a dragon. That's right, your mommy is a dragon of the shape-shifting kind, and so you too can transform into a dragon at will. So now you can actually participate as a dragon, soaring across the battlefield with a jetpack strapped to its back. And although I must admit that sounds pretty awesome, I found the whole experience rather meh. And here's the reason why. Although it's very cool that your dragon is kind of like an RPG character, it can spawn special attacks, it can get upgrades for both armor and health points, it can also generate buffs and auras that can aid your troops in battle, you're not able to actually take part in the RTS element of the game anymore. Basically, you have to build your army and then aid it without being able to control it. You do have the option to build units. However, I never found a way to actually control my units while on the field other than giving them waypoints and stuff like that. However, the system seems to be very broken in my experience, and the game once again has to really overcompensate for the fact that it is. That brings me to my second big bugbear of the game. My dragon has the ability to sprint by powering its jetpack and move across the battlefield extremely fast, which is a very useful ability to have. However, whenever my dragon receives flak, the sprint ability will not help you to evade any incoming projectiles. With that I mean I can literally fly all the way across the map and still get hit by projectiles that were fired half a minute ago. It feels really cheap and unfair, and it feels you're always working against the game mechanics rather than with them. And that's one of my main gripes with this game. It feels that they are trying too much here, trying to incorporate systems that just don't work well together. Still though, in the current gaming market, I have to applaud them for trying to combine something so unconventional. Unfortunately, it's an experience that broke my immersion countless times and felt me get screwed over by the game. But now let's talk about the rest of the video game. The world map of this game is kind of like that of Shogun Total War 1. Yes, that's the very first Total War. On each country you control, you can build a singular structure, like a gold mine which will generate more gold, or a embassy which will give you strategy cards. These strategy cards will then give you bonuses during battles like unit upgrades or extra units. Then there of course are cards you can use on the world map which will rob gold from enemy players or destroy some of his buildings. Then of course there are production buildings like the factory where you can build units that you can then move around, either overland or by transports. However, I do have a problem with the transports though. You see, when you load units onto the transports and then move the transport to another country, only the transport counts as a unit when you initiate a battle. In other words, you need to first deploy the units that are on the transport, because if you don't, they might as well not exist. And I regularly forgot to deploy my units like that, which caused me to lose a number of battles, which was really frustrating. And also, I believe, unnecessary. Now let me give you a demonstration of my second problem with the world map. Sure, we've got a proper attack force. Oh, oh. Well, you saw it there, ladies and gentlemen, because I hate this pop-up. You see, this is the cell building icon. Right now it's over here, because there's a war factory. But now I'll choose this one, who has a... And then it's over there. So when you want to buy units with the icon over here, but you accidentally select the wrong country, like this one, bum, you sell your building. You don't get a mission. Are you sure you want to sell this building? No, it's gone right away. But you know what? That's okay. Because I wanted to build a war factory anyway, which is 120 gold, which I don't have. That kind of sucks. That's really unfortunate. Now let's talk about the RPG-esque elements of the game. You commence your campaign from on board an airship called the Raven. On board of the Raven you can also conduct research. You can either upgrade the Dragon or your individual units with abilities and other upgrades. For this you need research points that can be generated at laboratories you can build on the world map. And as you can see, it's a very steampunk-inspired fantasy setting. Here you can also find the various races that inhabit the world. You've got the pragmatic dwarves, the hippie-esque greenish elves, the technocratic imps that primarily love to blow up stuff, the extremely conservative undead, and then you've got the rather aristocratic lizard people. You primarily interact with the ambassadors of said races to talk about policies in your realm. This can be policies regarding pet ownership and shrines that, quite frankly, most people would give then less to two cogs about. But then there are subjects that are very serious regarding things like equality, sexual and racial discrimination, gay rights, and even matters such as genocide. The decisions you make primarily impact your popularity with the races, which can give you bonuses on the world map, like additional units during battles, etc. etc. However, the races are very different on their political stances and sometimes might surprise you what their viewpoints are, and in some cases actually make good relevant arguments. Therefore, I found myself choosing for different races all the time. Although I like the imps, I don't think it's necessary to test their nuclear weapon on a sanctified gravesite. The choices you have to make also gives you a very interesting view into the characters you're dealing with. Especially Catherine. She is an angry lesbian feminist. The game makes clear she's also a major hypocrite and an unrepenting misandrist. For example, she wants you to outlaw arranged marriages for young girls. Now, of course, this sounds completely reasonable. She has no qualms with arranged marriages for young boys. And unfortunately, the game doesn't allow you to haggle with her on this subject, because how else do women get rid of their sons? All you can do is call her out on her hypocrisy, and that's the end of the interaction on this subject. And this is what makes interacting with Catherine very difficult for me. Also because they intentionally made her very unnuanced in all of her proposed solutions. But I think this is done by design. One of the subjects she brings up, for example, is the underrepresentation of women in the officer's corps. Now, I have no problem with aspiring to have a 50-50 split between men and women in the officer's corps. However, she demands you fire enough male officers so they can be replaced by women. Now, I think this is unreasonable, sheer for its impracticality, For example, you're firing experienced officers to get them replaced by, well, as far as I'm aware, non-experienced officers that receive their position not based on merit but by the shape of their genitalia, in times of war no less. You also rob families of their income. Now, I don't know the full context of this world, but it's very likely that these men are their sole providers for their families. And for what? Not gender equality, because you're firing people because they have the wrong gender. So I find it hard to find her moral high ground here. But you can't negotiate or convince her to think otherwise, so the conversation ended with her calling me a misogynist at every opportunity that she got for the rest of the game. I'm not sure this is as much character development as this is a commentary on how these issues are discussed in our current day and age. However, there was an interesting conclusion to my decision when Catherine told me that she had started a officers' academy solely for girls so they could outmerit the male officer corps. So maybe she did learn something from our conversation. Although I do still think it comes from the wrong place, the intentions are good. And the game asks many such questions in a way that, even though the outcome seems desirable, the means of execution leaves something to be desired. For example, is it okay to sacrifice historical landmarks that have a spiritual or historical significance to a people just to conduct some experiment, no matter how groundbreaking the discoveries might be? It's easy to take all these matters on face value, but when you ask the characters about their opinions on said subjects, it turns out that there is more to take into account. Based on my own experiences and convictions, I find it often very hard to make a decision, especially because the game does not allow you to haggle or convince characters to change their minds. And then I didn't even mention the in-game effects these decisions will have, like the popularity with said races or other bonuses that such decisions might give me. Quite frankly, I never even considered the in-game bonuses because I was so intrigued with the questions laid before me. So, let's get to the conclusion of this retrospective. If you're looking for a good RTS, Divinity Dragon Commander is not it. But when you're looking for an intriguing game about politics, this might be a good game for you. You have the ability to skip the entire RTS segments by having your generals fight the battles for you, but this might make the campaign significantly harder if you do so. Your generals do get experience from winning battles, however you can only use a general once per turn, which is also very frustrating and rather unlogical. However, I feel inclined to say that you can still buy the game on Steam for €40, and the reviews there are overwhelmingly positive, probably because of the RPG-esque elements and the political questions laid before you. Also, the visuals are well developed and did age well. So yeah, it might be a title you can give a try. However, I would buy it when it's in a Steam sale or something, because I do believe that €40 is simply too much for a game from 2015. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you played Dragon Commander yourself and what you thought of it. If you want me to review a steampunk inspired game, please let me know in the comments and I might take a look at it. And I don't know how often I will do these reviews because I do them in between other videos I'm working on. But this is simply a review I wanted to do for a very long time. So please let me know what you think and what I should do in the future. I am Bonsert, and as always, make it your way.